And there is more, by the way, regarding attacks on the Hindu community in Bangladesh. This story does not come from Bangladesh. It comes from the United States of America. Former U.S. President and Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump has spoken out strongly against the ongoing attacks on minorities in Bangladesh, specifically targeting the recent violence against Hindus. In a post on the platform X on Thursday, Trump labeled Bangladesh as a country, quote-unquote, in a total state of chaos, condemning what he called, quote-unquote, barbaric violence unleashed on Hindu, Christian and other minority communities in Bangladesh. So was Donald Trump just condemning what the minorities, specifically the Hindu community, are going through in the country, or is there more to this? Yes, there is more, a lot more in fact. First, look at the timing of this post. You see, the message from Trump came on Diwali, the festival of lights celebrated by Hindus worldwide. So Trump, in a way, could also be reaching out to the community just days ahead of the US election. In fact, as per reports, Trump's statement seemed crafted to resonate with a demographic that has historically leaned towards the Democrats. With 5.2 million Indian Americans eligible to vote in the upcoming US elections and the community's growing influence, the Republicans see an opportunity, a major one. You see, Trump's message did not just stop at condemning the violence. In his post, Trump said that the Biden administration, led by US President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, has, quote-unquote, ignored the Hindu community across the US and the world, adding that under his leadership, this situation, the targeting of minorities in Bangladesh, would not have happened. You see, Trump's post is multi-layered. He's not only condemning the attacks in Bangladesh, he also seems to be depicting a narrative that the Biden administration is not doing enough to protect the community. In his post, Trump also said he will, quote-unquote, protect Hindu Americans against the anti-religion agenda of the radical left, adding that he will look to strengthen US-India relations and his friendship with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Now, let's just pause here for a moment and look at this from a broader perspective. We are just days away from the US election. As per reports, the Indian American community is divided regarding the two candidates. And reportedly, each candidate is working towards capturing this rapidly growing voter base. Why is that? Well, because Indian Americans, despite making up only about 1.2% of the US population, have reportedly had a major impact in several swing states in the past. Votes that could make or break a candidate's chances of becoming a US president. As per reports, historically, Indian Americans have supported the Democratic Party, but recent trends suggesting that this loyalty may be shifting, at least somewhat. According to a survey conducted by private non-profit organization Carnegie Group in partnership with research and analytics firm YouGov, although the Democratic Party still holds a lead, Trump is seeing a marginal increase in support from the Indian Americans demographic. As per this survey, for Harris, 6 in 10 Indian Americans are likely to vote Democratic, while Trump can count on around 1 in 3. A number that, while modest, perhaps signals progress for a group that is traditionally favored Democrats. The survey also, in fact, reveals gender differences within the Indian American voting bloc. 67% of the Indian American women reportedly favor Harris, while only 53% of men support her. Very interesting. Conversely, Trump sees stronger support among Indian American men, with nearly 39% backing him. With such numbers, does the Democratic Party have reasons to worry? Yes. You see, there has been a shift. According to the survey, in the year 2020, 56% of the Indian Americans identified as Democrats. Today, the figure is down to 47%. Meanwhile, the proportion of Republicans has held steady and the share of independents is growing. So what does this really mean? This shift might suggest that Indian Americans, while still largely supportive of Democrats, are increasingly open to alternative voices. And with Trump appealing directly to Hindu Americans, positioning himself as a champion of religious freedom in a way, can he capitalize on this opportunity is the question. Interestingly, being of Indian descent does not guarantee votes from the Indian American community. According to the survey, Indian American Republicans like Nikki Haley, Vivek Ramaswamy, do not have high favorability ratings within this community, illustrating that Indian heritage alone does not secure the Indian American vote, which could be a cause of concern for Kamala Harris, who, as you remember, is of Indian descent. So again, the question is Trump's message just about Bangladesh or what's happening there, or perhaps a larger strategic ploy aimed at reshaping how Indian Americans actually view the Republican Party, a community that represents the second largest immigrant group in the United States? Even though the Biden-Harris campaign may still enjoy majority support, could Trump's targeted outreach on issues that actually matter to Indian Americans make inroads? Because if the Republicans can even capture a small percentage of the traditionally Democratic voters, it could reshape future elections and perhaps tip the balance in this one. In a race this close, every vote matters, and if Trump's appeal resonates with enough Indian Americans to make a difference actually, it could very well be the game changer he may be hoping for.
Meanwhile, Donald Trump is waging a war of his own. With election campaigning in its final stretch, Trump has found a new enemy to attack: the European Union. Trump says Europe needs to buy more American goods, otherwise Brussels will have a big price to pay.
And we'll also pass the Trump Reciprocal Trade Act, meaning if China or any other country is charging us 100 or 200% tariff or tax, then we will charge them 100 or 200% tariff or tax in return. In other words, it's an eye for an eye. And when that happens, everything will just go away.
It's an eye for an eye. That's classic Trump for you. When he was president, tariffs were his favorite tool. And if he wins again, he plans to double down. Trump has a new law in mind: the Trump Reciprocal Trade Act. Yes, he's named it after himself. And what does this law entail? Tariffs across the board on all imports. Imports from China will face a 60% duty, 60%. For other countries, it will be anywhere between 10 and 20%. That's the import duty. And this proposal is already making the Europeans nervous.
We are following the domestic debate in the US, and of course we know that some are considering tariffs. A trade controversy between the US and the European Union would not see any winner but only losers.
That was the German finance minister. His appeal will most likely fall on deaf ears. Tariffs are a key policy tool for Donald Trump. It's this pitch that got him elected the first time. In 2016, it was about punishing China. In 2024, Trump is targeting the European Union.
China is I would say, probably the toughest, but there are a lot of them. You know who's very tough? European Union, our beautiful European countries. Wonderful. If you add them up, they're almost the size of us. They treat us so badly, we have a deficit. They don't want anything from us. We have deficits that are crazy, and we're not going to have anymore. We're going to put tariffs on them.
So this is not a hollow threat. Trump has every intention of following through on this, and why not? It's a strategy that has worked for him in the past. Tariffs resonate with Donald Trump's voter base. The idea rallies them. So Trump has described himself as a tariff man. He says tariff is the most beautiful word in the dictionary. Let me quote. Most beautiful word in the dictionary, more beautiful than love, more beautiful than respect. I'm not making this up. These were his exact words. He said this a month ago. But beyond the politics and the populism, is this an approach that will work for America? Economists say it won't. They say if Trump goes ahead with this law, he'll start multiple trade wars with several friendly nations. And we have heard similar arguments before. Now the Democrats are latching onto this. Yesterday, Kamala Harris raised this. She attacked Trump and questioned his policies.
I pledge to seek common ground and common sense solutions to make your life better. I am not looking to score political points. I am looking to make progress. I pledge to listen to experts, to those who will be impacted by the decisions I make, and to people who disagree with me.
I'll do better than Trump. Essentially, that's her pitch. But will that be enough to win over voters? And is she offering an alternative? What is her economic policy? That is the biggest hole in her campaign. Harris says that Trump's economic policies are flawed, but she doesn't say what she is offering and how exactly she would do better than him. She hasn't been able to spell it out, and this is bothering her team. The Democratic Party is concerned. They feel that Kamala Harris has not been able to get her message through. And remember, the economy is a top issue in this election. That's what the American voters are thinking about. At least that's what polls say, that their biggest concern is the economy. So Harris is switching gears now. In the final week of her campaign, she plans to focus more on the economy. The Democrats may not admit to this, but this shift is telling. Trump's message on trade seems to be resonating with the voters, so Harris has been forced to change her strategy at the last minute. If she wants to beat Donald Trump in this election, she'll have to counter him on tariffs, and she doesn't have much time to figure out how.
As you can see, I'm not just MAGA, I'm dark, gothic MAGA.
Take over, Elon. Just take over.
Meanwhile, Elon Musk is preparing for a Trump victory. He backs the Republican candidate, and now he's working on policy prescriptions for the next US president in the hope and belief that it will be Donald Trump. Now, Musk, as you know, is a billionaire entrepreneur, the man who chases big ideas like electric cars and rockets. Well, he's got a new one now. Elon Musk wants to tackle America's debt problem. He says he has a plan. He can reduce America's expenses by $2 trillion. Listen to this.
You're being taxed. All government spending is taxation. So whether it's direct taxation or all government spending, it either becomes inflation or it's direct taxation. Your money is being wasted, and the Department of Government Efficiency is going to fix that.
Musk has called America's debt a time bomb, and he has a point. As of today, the US owes over $35 trillion. It's unsustainable debt. According to Elon Musk, the US pays $1 trillion as interest alone. $1 trillion every year as interest. That's more than America's defense budget, by the way. Musk says that taxpayer money is being wasted, and he can help reduce this wastage by as much as $2 trillion. Now, a quick reminder, Elon Musk is not on the ballot in this election. He's not on the ticket. He's not even contesting for a seat in the US Congress. Yet, he's sounding more and more like a candidate in the election. He's been actively campaigning for Donald Trump, not just as a star campaigner, but also as a major donor. Musk has poured in millions into Trump's campaign, more than $100 million to be precise. He's been giving out million-dollar checks to voters. Trump has even promised him a role in his future administration.
And we're going to bring Elon in. Anybody can land a rocket the way he landed that sucker. Coming down, they said, oh, it's going to crash into the gantry. I said, oh. And then those engines kicked in, and the fire and the flame starts pouring out of the left side and starts pushing it over. And it comes down, and those big, beautiful arms hugged it like you hugged your child.
He's entertaining. Clearly, Trump is impressed by SpaceX and Elon Musk. Perhaps he's hoping that Musk can use some of that rocket science to make America's debt disappear. And Elon Musk seems eager to take on the challenge. Earlier, he proposed a government efficiency commission, a body to rein in government spending, a government efficiency commission. This is just a proposal. No such commission exists at the moment, but Musk is acting like he's already in charge of it. So what is his big plan? How will he contain America's debt? Well, that he's yet to share. The specifics are missing from his pitch, but he keeps talking about it at Trump's rallies and amplifying his claims on X, the social media platform that he acquired. In fact, his recent posts focus almost entirely on the election, with Republican content and conspiracy theories. X has become Elon Musk's mouthpiece since he acquired it, and he's using this platform to rally more support for Trump. Basically, Elon Musk is a booster for Trump. He's betting big on the former president. Beyond social media amplification and personal donations, Musk is also building grassroots support for Trump. He has created a fund called America PAC. PAC, P-A-C, it stands for Political Action Committee. These are commonly used to funnel money into election campaigns. Musk has gathered lawyers, PR professionals and political pundits. His team is working closely with the Trump campaign. They're trying to mobilize voters by canvassing battleground states. The goal is to bring at least 800,000 Americans to vote for Trump. So Musk is going all out in backing Donald Trump. And this is not just about his political preferences. This is also a business decision. This election is an investment for him. He wants an ally in the White House, and Donald Trump fits the bill. Trump's policies align with Musk's priorities. Fewer regulation, less government interference, and most importantly, tariffs on Chinese companies. Elon Musk finds the Democrats weak on this front. Throughout Biden's tenure, Musk had multiple spats with the president. In recent days, in fact, Biden and the Democrats have been slamming him. Biden called Elon Musk an illegal worker. And here's what he's talking about. There's a backstory here. Musk was born in South Africa. In the 1990s, he came to the US on a student visa, but he ended up dropping out of the course. Reports say he was working illegally in the United States. Later, he transitioned to a work visa and finally became a citizen of the US a decade later. Now, Musk has denied all these allegations. He says the Democrats are just getting desperate. And this battle is only going to heat up as we inch closer to the election. The Democrats may not like Elon Musk, but they cannot afford to ignore him. In an election as close as this one, he could prove to be the difference between victory and defeat.
They've embarrassed us. Kamala has embarrassed us. She doesn't have what it takes. I'm asking you to dream big again. You're going to dream big.
And I pledge to be a president for all Americans and to always put country above party and self.
So 6 days to go for the US election, and guess which word is making headlines? Garbage. That's what Americans are talking about. It's not a joke, though it did begin with a comedian. On Sunday, this American comedian called Puerto Rico an island of garbage. We told you about it yesterday. Puerto Rico is a US territory. Its citizens are US citizens. So the comments sparked an uproar. The Trump campaign was quick to distance itself. By Monday, the issue snowballed. Puerto Rican voters were angry. Their leaders called for an apology. Some Republicans were also condemned. The Democrats, on the other hand, tried to capitalize on this. Kamala Harris quoted Puerto Rican voters, especially those in the swing states. And celebrities from this island backed the Democrats. So on Tuesday, Trump spoke about it for the first time.
Nobody loves our Latino community and our Puerto Rican community more than I do. Nobody. Yeah, it's interesting because I've done more for Puerto Rico than any president by far. Nobody close. I've provided historic funding, and the hospital ship, when they were hit with a couple of really bad ones right in the road. We got the ship over there with thousands of rooms, actually. It was amazing.
He said he loves Puerto Ricans, but the backlash continued. Things were actually looking up for the Democrats, but then came a comment by the U.S. president.
The Puerto Rican that I know, or Puerto Rico where I'm in my home state of Delaware, they're good, decent, honorable people. The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters. His demonization of Tina is unconscionable, and it's un-American. It's totally contrary to everything we've done.
That was Joe Biden. He was on a Zoom call with Voto Latino. It's a liberal non-profit group. The White House has released the transcript of his remarks. He says he means supporters. That's supporters, but with an apostrophe. A big difference there. But the Republicans aren't buying it. They say Biden called all of Trump's supporters garbage.
All right. Well, I wasn't going to say anything, but I have breaking news for you, Mr. President. You may not have heard this. Just moments ago, Joe Biden stated that our supporters are garbage. And I hope their campaign is about to apologize for what Joe Biden just said. We are not garbage. We are patriots who love America. And thank you for running, Mr. President.
Joe Biden has since issued a clarification. I have his tweet with me. This is what it says. Basically, he's saying that he just referred to the comedian, the one who made the garbage island comment. It wasn't a blanket statement for all Trump supporters, but Trump is having none of it.
Remember Hillary, she said deplorable? And then she said irredeemable, right? But she said deplorable. That didn't work out. Garbage, I think, is worse, right? But he doesn't know. You have to please forgive him. Please forgive him, for he not knoweth what he said.
So the damage is done, and it couldn't have come at a worse time. On Tuesday, Kamala Harris delivered her last speech. She will continue campaigning, of course, but this was her last big statement. Her last pitch to the voters, and she did it with the White House in her background. Ironically, it's the same place that Trump spoke from shortly before the 2021 Capitol riots.
America, we know what Donald Trump has in mind. More chaos, more division, and policies that help those at the very top and hurt everyone else. I offer a different path, and I ask for your vote. And here is my pledge to you. I pledge to seek common ground and common sense solutions to make your life better. I am not looking to score political points. I am looking to make progress.
So that's her closing argument, finding common ground. It's a powerful message, but one that got drowned by Biden's comment. You cannot pitch unity and then call the opposite side garbage. The Democrats are learning that the hard way. They had an advantage here. They had the Puerto Rican support. All they had to do was build on it. Yet it looks like they've squandered those gains, and it's a fear that the Harris campaign has long had. Look at this report. It says Biden wanted to campaign for Kamala Harris in the final days, but the Harris campaign never got back to his team. Why? Because they think that he is a political liability. But they don't want to tell him that. So they kept stonewalling his campaign plans. And we can understand why. His one comment seems to have cost the Democrats some gains that could have been crucial in a race as close as this one. Right now, both candidates are locked in a statistical dead heat. Kamala Harris is at 48%, Donald Trump is at 47%. In swing states, the race is even tighter. These are the states that will finally decide the outcome of the election. There are 7 swing states. Trump is leading in 5 of them. Harris is leading in the 6th one, and they're neck and neck in the 7th one. So with less than a week to go, Biden may have handed Trump an advantage. It could have been a stutter, it could have been a mistake, but at this point that does not really matter. What matters is that the Republicans will play it up and the Democrats will have to defend it. The US has sanctioned India. I know it sounds like a headline from the 90s, but it's not. It happened this Wednesday. The US announced sanctions on Indian companies and Indian nationals. Why? For trading with Russia. Nearly 400 entities have been sanctioned and 21 of them are Indian, 21 out of the 400. 19 companies and 2 citizens of India. Now most of these are electronics and spare parts companies. They have been accused of selling dual-use goods to Russia. What does that mean? Things that have commercial and military uses. They're called dual-use goods, like lasers or drones. Now the US says these Indian companies sold such dual-use technology to Russia, meaning they indirectly helped Russia's military. And India is not alone. Entities from China, Malaysia, Thailand and Turkey have also been sanctioned. So now these companies cannot trade with the US. They cannot use American financial institutions, plus their assets in the US will be frozen. Basically, it's a punitive action. And how has India responded to this? We haven't heard from the foreign ministry yet, but these sanctions are not unprecedented. Last November, the US sanctioned another Indian company, SI2 Microsystems. It was accused of selling technology to Russia. This June, the US ambassador to India issued a warning. He said Indian companies trading with Russia would face consequences. So these latest sanctions are not the first of their kind, nor are they coming out of the blue. But the timing is very important. India-US ties are going through a rough patch right now. Washington has accused India of trying to murder a Khalistani, Gurpatwant Singh Pannu. They've charged a former Indian government official in this case. Then last week, India and China announced a border deal, the first step to ending their conflict. And days later, the US has sanctioned 21 Indian entities. So how do we see this move? As a broad campaign against companies backing Russia, or as a targeted campaign on India? Well, both are plausible. You see, India has never supported US sanctions on Russia, nor has it promised to abide by them. Just look at the trade data. India is exporting more engineering goods to Russia now. In 2022, this trade was worth $680 million. In 2023, it rose to $1.3 billion. So India's engineering exports have doubled. Some of this has alerted the US. In fact, let's go through the sanctions list. One of the targeted entities is Ascend Aviation. It's a spare parts company based in Delhi. They're accused of selling 700 shipments to Russia. 700 shipments of what? Aircraft components. Another example is Mask Trans. They allegedly sold $300,000 worth of goods to Russia. A third example is Futrivo. They sold goods worth $1.4 million to Russia, mostly electronic components. These are 3 of the 21 sanctioned entities. It's a classic case of American hypocrisy. They openly arm India's adversaries like Pakistan. And I'm not talking dual use here. I'm talking about pure lethal use goods. Pakistan is said to have 80 plus F-16 fighter jets, all sold to them by the United States of America. Somehow India is supposed to accept these sales. But God forbid, Indian companies sell some circuits to Russia. They get sanctions and threats. Also, who exactly enforced these sanctions? It wasn't the United Nations. It wasn't any global court. It was America and its Western friends. They pick and choose what to sanction. For example, Russia made up 15% of Europe's gas imports in 2023. How many EU members were sanctioned for that? None, 0. Yet India selling spare parts is a problem. Like I said, classic double standard. Unfortunately, the US has a strategic advantage here. They dominate global financial institutions. They also control crucial payment systems. If they want, they can cut Indian companies off from these systems. That would be a major body blow. At the same time, you cannot let the US push you around. The key here is to find a balance between the two. Until, of course, you have alternatives of your own.
I predicted Joe Biden's exact 306 to 232 Electoral College victory. And in this video, with just 5 days to go until the 2024 election, I'll be sharing with you guys my updated electoral map projection between Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump. This has probably been one of the most interesting election cycles in American history. I mean, just 5 months ago, Joe Biden was still expected to be the Democratic nominee, but in mid-July, he dropped out of the race. Kamala Harris secured her spot at the top of the ticket. And in August and September, this really looked like a competitive race. Many people on the left even thought that Harris was going to win. But I've been true to my projections this entire time. I've always put Trump ahead because this election is so different from what 2020 was like. The former president is so much more popular and is pulling so much better all across the board. And so around 1 to 2 weeks ago, Trump began his final surge, reminiscent to what we saw in 2016. When everybody thought that Hillary Clinton was on track for a crushing victory, Donald Trump came out of nowhere. But there were early signs. He surged in the polling in the week before the election, and that is exactly what we're seeing right now. Donald Trump has actually taken the lead in the popular vote against Kamala Harris for the first time and leads in all 7 swing states, something that wasn't true ever since Kamala Harris entered the race. And so we're finally now going to dive right into the projection. Starting off with the solid states for both candidates, races that either Harris or Trump are going to win by 15 percentage points or more. This is certainly a high threshold to meet. Starting off with the safe blue states for Harris, we have Washington and California on the West Coast, as well as Hawaii, Illinois, Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Delaware, Maryland, District of Columbia, and the 1st District of Maine. As for Trump, he is easily going to carry Utah, Wyoming, Idaho, Montana, North and South Dakota, all of Nebraska except its 2nd District, Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, Indiana, and South Carolina. So with these solid states filled in for both candidates, it is a virtual tie. Harris at 131, Trump at 122. We're now going to fill in the likely states for both candidates, races, and that either nominee is going to win by 7 to 15 points. These states are going to be noticeably more competitive. They are going to be slightly contested, but one candidate will still maintain a clear edge. And so we're going to begin with the likely states for Donald Trump, starting off with the 2 most obvious. We have the state of Alaska, a state he's carried by double-digit margins in both of the last 2 elections. He is not going to lose Alaska, although the state has been trending to the left over the last few years. We also have the 2nd District of Maine. He is going to win that for a 3rd time as well. And then in the Midwest, of course, we have Iowa and Ohio. These 2 states were supposed to be very competitive in 2020. Polling said Trump was only going to win by 1%, but look what happened. He won Iowa by 8, Ohio by 8 as well. And this time, polling is showing Trump up by around 6 to 8 points in these 2 races. He's probably going to be able to break the double-digit threshold, but it's not going to be enough for these 2 races to be classified as solid. Trump is probably not going to win them by 15 points or more. But Iowa and Ohio, these are going to be reliable states for the former president. It's going to give him an additional 23 electoral votes. And then down in the Sun Belt, we have 2 additional likely Trump states. We're going to begin in Texas, another state where the polling had Trump up by just 1% in 2020. He carried it ultimately by 6. He won it by 9 back in 2016. And today he is on track for his largest margin ever. Polling in Texas shows him up by 10%. He might even get close to that 15-point threshold, something that no Republican has broken since Mitt Romney back in 2012. It is no secret that Texas has been trending to the left. It is definitely not as a Republican as it once was, but this is a state that's not going to flip blue at least for another 2 to 3 decades. Just think about how many people there are on Texas. Democrats are going to have to flip millions upon millions of voters if they want to win a Lone Star state. That simply isn't happening anytime soon, and so Texas will remain likely red. And then finally we have Florida. The Sunshine State used to be one of the closest in the country. Just look at 2012. It was the only tilt state on the map, the only state decided by 2 points or less. In 2016, it went to Trump by a tilt margin by 1.2%. And then in 2020, everybody thought Joe Biden was going to win Florida. But not only did he lose it, he actually performed worse than Clinton from 4 years ago. And Trump's margin in Florida is probably going to triple once again, just like it did from 2016 to 2020. Trump is probably going to win the Sunshine State by around a double-digit margin, either right under it or right over it. And so with all the solid and likely states filled in, Donald Trump is at 219 electoral votes, just 51 away from the presidency. Kamala Harris has some catching up to do. We're now going to fill in her likely states. We're going to start off out west in Oregon, a state that was likely for Hillary Clinton back in 2016. The state simply isn't as liberal as its 2 neighbors. In fact, the governor's election in 2022 went down to a single-digit margin in Oregon, although the Democrat did end up coming out on top. We also have New York and New Jersey, 2 states that simply aren't as liberal as their northeastern neighbors anymore. Joe Biden won them by solid margins in 2020, but Kamala Harris isn't going to be able to repeat his success. New Jersey was barely solid blue, while New York went to Biden by 23 points. Kamala Harris is going to be lucky if she wins it by even half that margin, considering just how poorly Democrats are doing in New York. It's not the Democratic stronghold that it once was. So both of these states are going to be likely for the vice president. And finally, we have Colorado, a state that Kamala Harris is going to win by just over 7 points, despite Joe Biden having carried it by 14 4 years ago. Colorado is going to be a lot more competitive, but considering just how blue it was in 2020, it's unlikely that this state really gets that close. And so we're now left with the 12 most competitive races in the country, as well as the 2nd District of Maine. It is going to be these states that will actually decide who the 47th president is going to be. They make up less than a quarter of the Electoral College's 538 votes, but they really do have all the power when it comes to picking our next commander-in-chief. And so we're now going to fill in the lean states for both candidates. These are states that are going to go to Harris or Trump by margins of 2 to 7%. And so this time we'll start with the lean Harris states just to get them out of the way, because obviously we know that this election is going to come down to a group of 7, the 7 key battlegrounds. Now, the lean states for Harris, they're all states that Joe Biden carried by likely margins from 4 years ago. These states were not that close last time, but they are significantly more competitive now that Harris is at the top of the ticket. When to start off out west in New Mexico, Harris is going to win the race by just under 7 points. The state can definitely get competitive. Just look at what happened in 2016. Clinton won by just 8%, and I wouldn't be surprised if Harris performed even worse, as Hispanic voters in New Mexico are continuously shifting more and more to the right. We also have Tim Walsh's home state of Minnesota. This is a big one. This is the home state of Harris's running mate, and she's not even going to be able to outperform Joe Biden. Joe Biden won Minnesota by 7 points, and he ran with Harris as his running mate, who was from nowhere near Minnesota. She, of course, calls California her home state. In 2016, Hillary Clinton almost lost the state entirely, so Trump can definitely get competitive here. Choosing Walsh probably did save Kamala Harris from a humiliating defeat, but it's definitely not proven to be enough for her to actually outperform the incumbent president. We're now left with just 3 more lean blue states and the 2nd District of Nebraska, which Harris is going to win by around 5 points after redistricting in 2021, made the 2nd District more liberal. It's basically Omaha and some of its surrounding suburbs. Moving up to the northeast, we have New Hampshire and Maine, 2 states that were incredibly competitive back in 2016. Clinton carried the Granite State by just under half a percentage point, and Maine by less than 3. Now, Harris isn't going to perform as poorly as Clinton, but she's not going to outperform Biden, who carried New Hampshire by 7 and Maine by 9. So both of these races are going to fall somewhere in between. They're going to be lean blue. And finally, in Virginia, we have a race that's going to be just as competitive as it was in 2016, when Hillary Clinton came out on top by just 5 points. And this was when she ran with Tim Kaine, a literal sitting senator from the Commonwealth of Virginia. She wasn't even able to win the state by a likely margin. Joe Biden did, though. In 2020, he won it by 10.1%. Kabul has no chance of winning Virginia by a likely margin. It's going to be significantly more competitive than it was 4 years ago. And so with all of the solid, likely, and lean Harris states filled in, she's at 226 electoral votes, neck and neck with Trump, who's at 219. But we have to remember is that we haven't even started with the lean red states yet. And so with these 7 states, these are the 7 battlegrounds that you see in yellow on basically every single electoral map. The results in all the other states are basically predetermined. The reason why we have a lean state for Trump in this category is because he's simply doing so well in races that are supposed to be purely even. And so we're basically going to chart out Trump's pathway to victory in terms of the states he's going to win by the largest margins, and then the ones that are going to be the most competitive out of the 7. So I'm going to start off in Arizona. This one's probably going to vote to the right of both Georgia and North Carolina, something that it did not do in either 2016 or 2020. In 2016, Trump won Arizona by 3.5%. He then lost it by 0.3 against Joe Biden. Arizona is an incredibly competitive state. It traditionally has been Republican, but over the last decade or so, it shifted to the left. It currently has 2 sitting Democratic senators. Now, Republicans haven't made the best choices with their candidates in the down-ballot races. Whether it was governor in 2022 or Kari Lake lost, or Kari Lake again, this time around for the Senate election against Ruben Gallego. We also saw Republicans put up Martha McSally twice. She was a disaster. Republicans can win races in Arizona. They just haven't been choosing the best candidates, but Trump is a strong candidate. He is going to be able to win Arizona. It is going to be lean Republican. I'm currently projecting around a 3% margin of victory for the former president. Out east, we also have Georgia and North Carolina. The early voting numbers in these two states are looking very good for Republicans. Trump is no doubt going to carry both of them. Now, he did win North Carolina in 2020, but he actually lost Georgia. It was the most competitive state in the entire country. Biden was the first Democrat to win it since Bill Clinton in 1992. And just like Arizona, Georgia traditionally has been a Republican stronghold. It went to Trump by 5 points in 2016. It went to Romney by 8 in 2012. And even John McCain carried it by 5 back in 2008. And under the Bush era, it was 16 points. So Georgia is going to return back into the Republican call. It's not going to be a huge victory for Trump, but it is going to be enough. This is the second step to victory for the former president. He's also going to win at North Carolina, the only swing state he's won in both of the last two elections. And so Trump is now at 262 electoral votes. He can win any 3 of the remaining upper Midwestern states to cross 270. Nevada simply isn't going to be enough. And so when I start off in Pennsylvania, this is the one that's probably going to go to Trump first. Generally, it is the one in the middle of Michigan and Wisconsin in terms of...
Tired of being a slave to your trading screen? Are you drowning in losses because of manual trading?
how left or right leaning it is. However, because Kamala Harris shows Tim Walsh to be her running mate, Minnesota governs Wisconsin quite a bit. She's going to receive a slight boost in the state, which is why Pennsylvania will likely be the tipping point that gets Trump over 270. It's a state he did win back in 2016. He also won Michigan and Wisconsin, so it's not at all impossible for him to win these 3 races. In 2020, he did lose Pennsylvania by 1.2, but he's leading in the polls by around 1%. There's no doubt he's going to outperform that. He is going to take Pennsylvania back. And so this really is it. The election is over. It doesn't really matter the Electoral College margin that Trump actually wins by. However, he is going to win a few additional states. We have the tilt states. These races will be decided by 2 percentage points or less. And first off, we have Wisconsin and Michigan. Trump is not going to lose these races if he wins Pennsylvania. All 3 of these states, known as the former Blue Wall states, they always vote for the same candidate. In fact, the last time that they all didn't go to the same nominee was the election of 1988. In every single election, from 1992 onwards, they all voted blue, with the exception of 2016 when Trump won all 3 of them. And then, of course, 2020, Joe Biden wins them back. I do not expect this trend to end. I expect all 3 of them to go to the same candidate. And that, of course, would be the former president. And finally, we also have Nevada, a state that's eluded Republicans for the last 20 years. Out of all the swing states, Nevada is the only one that Trump has never won before. But that is going to change in just 5 days. Nevada is going to go red. The state's been shifting to the right over the last decade. Republicans won the governorship here with Joe Lombardo unseating the Democratic incumbent, Steve Sisolak. And so as we finally enter the month of November, Donald Trump, I currently project to win 312 electoral votes. Kamala Harris, 226. This is going to be the worst Democratic performance since 1988. Harris really is in trouble right now.
Voting in this year's election, but the US president is not chosen directly by the voters. It's not a popular vote. Instead, they're chosen by the Electoral College. You see, each American state has a fixed number of electoral votes. That's according to the state's population. Whoever wins the state wins all the electoral votes. The Electoral College has a total of 538 votes. A candidate needs 270 or more to win. So it's a complicated system, and one that's gotten some pushback in the recent years. We'll tell you why.
On the 5th of November, millions of voters in the United States will cast their ballot to elect their next president. However, there's a catch. The world's oldest democracy does not hold elections which can be considered as the easiest to understand. In fact, the American voting system is quite complicated. Now, most democracies in the world follow something that's called the popular vote, where voters directly cast their ballots to a political party or leader. It's a direct transfer of the vote from the voter to whoever is on the ballot. But the United States does not follow this. In fact, it's the only democracy in the world that has an indirect voting system called the Electoral College. Simply put, the Electoral College is a process of voting. It's not really a college. It was established in 1787 AD and was included in the US Constitution by the Founding Fathers. The Electoral College is basically the selection of electors who are called delegates. On the 5th of November, when Americans will queue up to vote, they won't actually be voting for their next president. Instead, they'll actually be voting for delegates who represent their respective states, and these delegates will then vote for the president. So, how does the Electoral College work? The Electoral College is made up of 538 delegates. You must be wondering where the number 538 comes from. It's the number of senators and representatives from each of the 50 states. The breakdown of 538 includes exactly 100 senators, 2 from each state, and 438 representatives from the 50 states. Each state's number of representatives is based on its population. Let's take a closer look with an example. California and Texas are the 2 most populous states, and so they have a higher number of representatives. However, regardless of the population of the states, each of them gets 3 votes to start with. The remaining are then added depending on the population of the state. However, that does not mean that the states with a higher population enjoy more voting rights. In fact, it can be quite the opposite. Let's take the example of 2 states. The population of Texas is over 29 million. On the other hand, Alaska has a much smaller population of just above 700,000. However, each representative from Texas and Alaska roughly represents the same proportion of the population. So, as Texas gets 38 representatives in the US Congress, Alaska gets 3. And this makes voting different in Texas and Alaska, because each of the 38 delegates from Texas now represent roughly over 760,000 people. Meanwhile, each delegate from Alaska represents over 250,000 people. Basically, it takes 760,000 people from Texas to get 1 vote, but it just takes 250,000 people from Alaska to get that same 1 vote. So the vote in Alaska can be considered a lot more influential. When Americans go to polls in November, they aren't exactly voting for the president directly, but their state's representatives, whether that's Democrat or Republican. And then these delegates give their votes to the presidential candidate from their party. Whichever candidate then wins the majority in a state, no matter how big or small it may be, wins all the electoral votes of that state. And in total, to win the race to the Oval Office, a candidate must win 270 and more votes across 50 states. So when Americans say this,
I love her. I am so glad to see a presidential nominee who is youthful and joyful, and I think that reflects right back onto the Democrats. My first time voting in a presidential election, and I could not be happier.
I don't know the exact numbers, but I know the last election, I think Trump got like 88 or 90% of the vote here. I think he's going to get that again.
The courts will take care of that. Let's take care of them in November.
what they really mean is that they will vote for the delegates who represent their political party. And then, those delegates will vote for the presidential candidate from their respective parties.
Kamala, you are fired! You're fired! Get out! Get out!
It's time to turn the page.
However, the delegates don't have to necessarily vote for the candidate that the population wants to give its vote to. In fact, electors are free to vote against the wishes of the people. And this is despite having been elected as a delegate by the voters. So, with how complex the electoral system is, should the US continue with it, or adapt the much simpler popular voting system? A survey from 2023 shows that a majority of Americans want to do away with the Electoral College. A Pew Research study shows that nearly 2/3 of US citizens want popular voting. Americans say that it would truly reflect the mood of the nation for who should sit in the Oval Office. That's because a presidential candidate could win the popular vote, which means that more people voted for them, but they could lose the presidential race due to the Electoral College, where the victor is decided by the number of delegates and not the votes of the people. The Pew study has some more insights on the issue. It says that Democrats are far more likely than Republicans to support moving to the popular vote. On aggregate, over 80% of Democrats say that they would like to have the popular voting system in America. In contrast, about 45% of Republicans share the same sentiments. Moving away from party ideologies and towards demographies, almost 70% of Americans under the age of 50 prefer the popular vote. On the other hand, Americans who are 65 and older want the Electoral College to continue.
A very nice call from Kamala.
The current system allows a candidate to lose the popular vote but still win the Electoral College. This occurred both in the 2000 and the 2016 elections, which were won by George W. Bush and Donald Trump respectively. However, the only way to change the Electoral College would be through a constitutional amendment. But amending the Constitution is a Herculean task. The last time it was done was in the year 1992, and it was about raising salaries for congressional lawmakers. So, for now, it looks like Americans will have to keep voting using the